The reason why I call this press conference is that I was informed yesterday evening that there was a meeting of the Chamber, the annual meeting of the Chamber, TT Chamber, and that at this meeting, Mr. Arthur Lockjack made some statements. I think his statement was, if this is accurately reported, I mean, after all, it is the Express.
So it would be accurate.
Basically, government has to get the hell out of there. Adding that he agreed that the bailout of Clico may have been warranted. Why is the government still holding on to 50 or 60 companies owned by the CL Financial Group? They are appointing this board and that board. There are few business people on those boards. Those things are being run under the guise of I don't know what. And what was equally surprising was the Express has alleged that the audience of local entrepreneurs and business executives applauded Lockjack's statement. Well, yes. I think it's public knowledge that CL Financial was put into liquidation in 2017. I think that is public knowledge. That has been widely publicized in the print and electronic media. In fact, on the 15th of September 2017, the High Court of Trinidad and Tobago ordered that CL Financial be wound up, and two persons, Mr. Hugh Dixon and Mr. Marcus Wyde, of the firm Grant Thornton, were considered to be joint liquidators of the affairs of the company. And it is further ordered, this is quite since September 2017, that the joint liquidators file the registrar report in writing within 3 months of that date, that is 3 months of September, and there are thenceforth every 6 months file to the registrar report in writing as to the position of and the progress made with the winding up of the said company, including accounts of costs and expenses incurred by the liquidators and other matters connected with the winding up. So since September 2017, it is public knowledge that CL Financial has been in liquidation under the control of court-appointed liquidators who are required to report to the court every 6 months. On the 15th of September 2017, the court ordered that CL Financial be wound up under the provisions of the Companies Act, and Mr. Hugh Dixon and Mr. Marcus Wyde of the firm Grant Thornton be considered joint liquidators of the affairs of the company. And in addition, the liquidators are required to report to the court every 6 months on progress made with the winding up of the company and the realization of the assets thereof, including accounts of costs and expenses incurred by the joint liquidators and any other matters connected with the winding up as the court may from time to time direct. So the liquidators have been filing reports in the court. In fact, I think I saw in one of the daily newspapers commentary on a recent filing made by the liquidators. I think that was you, Mr. Wilson.
News report, not commentary.
You can call it what you want. But there was a report in the newspapers, in the Express, of the latest filing made to the court by the liquidators of CL Financial, who have been in control of CL Financial since 2017. I can only assume that Mr. Lockjack and all these entrepreneurs and executives read the newspapers. I can only assume. So they must know that CL Financial is under the control of court-appointed liquidators. So this statement about the government has to get the hell out of there makes absolutely no sense. And in fact, I would say it is tantamount to public mischief. I want to make it clear that the government is not appointing this board and that board. In fact, in the filings to the court, the liquidators are the ones that are appointing the boards of the various subsidiaries of CL Financial. And that should be known by all of these magnates, all these tycoons and so on. I just think this whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, what kind of statement is this? these things are being run under the guise of I don't know what. Absurd. So I just want to clear the air on that. The government has directors on Angostura because it has a 30% shareholding in Angostura, and it has one director on home construction because it has a 16% ownership of home construction. And all of the other members of the boards of all of the subsidiaries of CL Financial, all have been appointed by the liquidators, not by the government. The government is not running these companies. That's farcical and an absurd statement. Before I move on to the other topic, would you all like to ask me questions on this particular incident?
Yes. What is the status of the payment of the government, of the debt to the government?
No, on the statements made by Mr. Lockjack.
No.
You have nothing to say?
No.
I see. Anybody else have anything to say? I see.
No, but on the issue of CL Financial.
I see. Well, this is just bad. I mean, time to exit CLF. Government exited CLF in September 2017 by way of a court order. It's just terrible.
Do you fear that his words may have some sort of lasting impact, and that's why you're calling this press conference today?
No, we are just fed up of the campaign of public misinformation. This is not the first time. I hope it's the last time. I mean, this is just bad information, and we're fed up of it. So we're just clearing the air. It's time to put all of this to rest. We are not running CL Financial. From the time the government went to the court and asked the court to appoint liquidators, we surrendered control of CL Financial. And it could not be anything else, because that is the provisions of the Companies Act. The Companies Act makes that very clear. And all of these gentlemen, they run companies. So they should know what are the provisions of the Companies Act. So they should know that from the time a creditor approaches the court to wind up a company, to appoint liquidators, the creditor, in this case it was the government, relinquishes control of the companies. We gave up control of CL Financial in 2017. So to hear somebody say in 2019 that we're running the companies, we're appointing boards, and we have to get the hell out of there, it's just unacceptable. So, yes, Mr. Wilson.
What is the status of the CLICO debt to the government?
I don't have those figures for you, but I can say that the government is receiving periodic payments from Colonial Life Insurance Company. And the debt is being systematically reduced. I don't have the actual number for you here today.
When do you expect that to be paid?
One of the biggest challenges we've faced, and we continue to face it, but in that report that Mr. Wilson made about the court, what was reported to the court by the liquidators, we had a problem with some shares owned by Colonial Life in a methanol company called MHIL, MH International Limited, I believe. And that company operates methanol companies in the Middle East. CLICO owns 56% or so of that company. But the ownership of the 56% was disputed. 49% was clearly owned by Colonial Life, and CL Financial had a claim to the other 7%. The purpose of the submission to the court by the liquidator was to allow the 7% that is owned by CL Financial to be passed over to CLICO for fair market value. Because there was an argument that there were a number of trust arrangements between CL Financial and Colonial Life, several of them, which were not properly documented, and they're in dispute. And in fact, one of the biggest jobs that the liquidator has is to unravel all of those trust arrangements to determine whether they are in fact legal or whether they're not legal. So that this was one of them. So that even though CLICO was of the view that it owned the majority of MHIL, there was this argument about that additional amount which would have taken CLICO over the 49%. So what we decided to do to solve this problem is CLICO would pay CL Financial 47%. The funds would be put into an escrow account pending the resolution of whether the trust where that the shares actually belong to Colonial Life but were being held in trust by CL Financial for Colonial Life until pending the resolution of that problem. We decided that we need to transfer the shares over to CLICO, so CLICO paid for them, and the money went into escrow account. What that I don't have the actual amount, but I can tell you what the 56% is worth. It's worth in the vicinity of about $2.7 million. So you can do the math. $2.7 billion.
US, right?
TT. 2.7 billion TT dollars. The 56% is worth. So you can do the math and figure out what the 7% is worth. I think it's $300 and something million. I'm not 100% sure on that. I just did some quick math in my head. So that now that CLICO would get title to the 56%, CLICO can now initiate a process in the agreement between the Trinidad shareholders of that company and the Middle Eastern shareholders, which is a company called CAL, which I believe is owned by the Proman people. The shareholders agreement says that before you sell those shares, you have to first offer them to the other shareholder, which is the Proman people. If they decline to purchase the shares, you can then sell them, but you can't sell them to a competitor of Proman. So it's a very difficult thing, because who would want methanol shares unless they're in the methanol business? So it has proven to be a very complex thing, but at least we've got to the point where the shares are now with CLICO over 50%, and we can now proceed to initiate the process for them to be offered to the Proman people, and then we take it from there. If we succeed, because we want to put them into NIF, those shares were identified for NIF 2. So if we succeed, then we can offer a NIF 2 based on those shares. And that's the plan for those shares. That will reduce the debt owed by CLICO to the government by $2.7 billion, if we can achieve that. Okay? But I can't tell you the exact amount that we are owed. I don't want to speak out of turn. Any other questions on the CL matter?
Have the shares been offered to Proman as yet? You know?
No, the CLICO first had to get the controlling interest, the 56%, before it could offer. Because prior to that, there was a dispute about who could offer the shares to Proman, whether it had to be CLICO and CL jointly or separately offering the shares. So that also created a lot of legal difficulty. So now that the shares are with CLICO, CLICO will offer them to Proman.
So the government would like Proman to decline to buy the...
No, if we get the cash, we'll be fine, because NIF is just a vehicle to raise funds and also put some good investments into the hands of citizens.
Just to clarify, can you just remind me how much of the debt has been paid off?
Well, that's the problem. I don't have the figures. We know that we know that the total was 23 plus billion, and we know that a significant amount of that has already been repaid, but I can't give you the full amount. We are still owed several $1 billion by CLF and Colonial Life. Several billion. I can't tell if it's 5 billion, 6 billion, but we're still owed several billion.
What is the status of the sale of the CLICO traditional portfolio?
That is under review, because the traditional portfolio was offered to the local insurance industry, and we've had a little glitch whereby the company being recommended is the one that offered the lowest amount for the shares. And the thing is, I don't think people understand the role of a minister, and this is why these kind of statements are made. As a minister, I have to protect the public interest. The argument being made is that the company that made the lower bid is a strong, substantial company, and the risk of that company failing in the future is low. And therefore, the view is that we should go with the lower bid because it's being assigned to a very stable local company. The other company, the view is that they're not as stable as the first one, and that they would not be able to manage this portfolio, and there would be a higher risk to policyholders. What the central bank is a bit concerned about is selling the portfolio to a company that may not be able to manage it. So I, as minister, have to be very, very careful. I have to protect the public interest, and I have to ensure maximum return for taxpayers of this country to make sure we get back as much of that $23 billion, 23 plus billion that was put out. I wouldn't want to say any more. What I would say is that no decision has been made in this ministry with respect to that matter. Okay?
Would it not be possible for the government or the central bank to negotiate a higher price with Sagicor, the preferred bidder?
Well, I must tell you that the difference is huge. The difference between the low bid and the high bid is substantial, very large, $300 million. So you have to be very careful. And I mean, I don't know what my predecessors did, but I don't play with those things. I'm very careful about that sort of thing.
Can you tell us how many people did?
Initially there were 4, and it boiled down to 2. And it ended up with bids from Sagicor and Maritime. No decision has been made by the Ministry of Finance, but a recommendation has been made by the central bank.
So you, Ministry of Finance, has to sign off on it?
Well, you see, there's also this mythology outside there, and I'll go to that with the NCB matter, that the Minister of Finance and the Ministry of Finance has no role in all of this. We should just sit back and let everybody do whatever they want to do. That is not the case, especially when shares in financial institutions are being sold to foreign investors. The Ministry of Finance, the Minister has to issue a foreign investment license, has to approve it. There's also the question of competition and monopoly. And we have to look at what will happen in the market, whether there's an over-concentration of insurance business or banking business in any one particular company or conglomerate. So we in finance, we have to be very careful about that. So even though we may get recommendations from the central bank or in the case of NCB from the Securities Commission, my job is to protect the public interest. So I'm not a rubber stamp. I'm very careful about what I do. Okay?
Next topic is NCB.
Yeah? All right. Y'all finished with CL, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It has parliament. Oh, and I have to cover
I
it.
think the minister knows that as well.
Yeah, but I don't think you know that.
I am an elected member of Parliament. I am a member of the House of Representatives. Okay? I have to go to Parliament before you all. We have plenty time. It's only 1:45. So let's deal with NCB now. There are several issues with NCB, Jamaica's, or so many different companies, NCB Global Holdings, NCB, the Jamaica company, I can't remember the name right now. There's so many issues with respect to the attempted takeover by NCB of Guardian Holdings Trinidad that has become a very complex issue. I made a statement recently saying that we welcome this investment by a Jamaican company, and we do, because Trinidad companies invest in Jamaica, they invest in Barbados, invest in all islands throughout the Caribbean, and we believe in that sort of investment, that movement of equity and capital among the countries of CARICOM. In fact, we welcome it. But one of the first things we had to establish was, is NCB a foreign investor? Because that was the first argument that was being made, that because NCB of Jamaica is incorporated within a CARICOM country, specifically Jamaica, they should be exempt from any requirement for a foreign investment license. What we did, being careful, we don't advise ourselves, so we got the advice of experienced senior counsel. And what we have determined is that NCB is in fact controlled by a foreign investor. If you look at the ownership of the companies, there's one in Trinidad that is owned by a company in Jamaica, that is owned by companies in Barbados, that are owned by companies in Canada. So if you follow it all the way back, you find that NCB is in fact under the control of foreigners. Foreigners in the meaning of non-CARICOM citizens and persons. And therefore, the actual foreign investor is Portland Holdings Incorporated. I'm sure you've done that research yourself, Mr. Wilson. And Portland Holdings is a Canadian company. And that is the one that, registered in Canada. And that is the one that has all the ownership in all these companies if you trace it all the way back. So, NCB is a foreign investor within the meaning of the Act and requires a license. There's no real problem with that. There's no issue in the Ministry of Finance with respect to granting a license to NCB just because it's owned by foreign investors. That's not a significant problem. We just needed to settle that fact that it is under the control of foreign entities and therefore does require a license. But we are not going to say that because they are controlled by foreign entities, we're not going to give them a license. That's the whole point of the Foreign Investment Act. You welcome foreign investment once everything is in order. The real problems that we've had to grapple with is an arrangement for the purchase of a significant amount of the shares, $45 million worth of the shares. And based on the information we have, NCB does not appear to have sufficient cash at hand, I'm using my words very carefully, sufficient cash at hand to purchase all of the shares which it has offered to buy via its offer and takeover bid circular. So an arrangement has been made between NCB and two shareholders, Universal Investments and Associated Brands Investments Limited. I think Associated Brands is Mr. Lockjack. And he too has been making a lot of noise about this investment and urging us in finance to just get on with it and approve the license. And that too that's just not acceptable, because we are a regulatory authority and we have to do our work without fear or favor in the public interest. So there are two shareholders, Universal Investments and Associated Brands, who want to transfer their ownership of their shares in Guardian Holdings to NCB without an immediate cash payment. They are proposing that a loan. So they're proposing a paper transaction where no money passes to the shareholders. NCB acquires the shares in Guardian Holdings, and then the $45 million for those shares is paid 3 years from the date of the loan with 6.5% interest. So that was a very complex matter that we had to deal with, because this was not stated in the offer. In the offer and takeover bid circular, there is no statement that you could transfer the ownership of your shares by way of a loan. It's not stated there. This is what senior counsel has advised, that this was not spelled out in the offer and takeover bid circular. Senior counsel has also advised that this loan arrangement is not consistent with the terms and conditions of the offer and takeover bid circular. What we've been told as well, that the proposed loan arrangement to fund the purchase of the shares from the two companies by way of a loan is in breach of Section 10 of the Financial Institutions Act. I only got this advice yesterday morning. And we have been advised that we have to be satisfied that payment will be made for the shares consistent with the terms and conditions of the offer contained in the circular and in compliance with the provisions of the Act. So we have been told that we should insist that the shares are paid for at the same time that ownership is transferred from the local shareholders to NCB. This is a matter that has, created some issues for us for quite a while, but this is the advice I've received yesterday. So I am hoping that in order to facilitate this, the shareholders will come to some arrangement where there will be payment. They can always work out some other loan structure afterwards, but I'm hoping that there would be an actual transaction where the shares are paid for when the title is transferred, and then we should have no problem on our side in terms of approving the transaction.
You said Section 10 of the Financial Institutions Act.
Yeah.
Is this a condition precedent for the Ministry of Finance's approval of this transaction?
That is a condition for the issue of a foreign investment license. Sorry, the Foreign Investment Act, my mistake. The Foreign Investment Act. Yeah, not financial institution. Let me correct that. That the loan arrangement is a breach of Section 10 of the Foreign Investment Act. And what that says, consideration for the shares to be acquired by a foreign investor shall be paid in an internationally traded currency through a person authorized by law as a dealer in that foreign currency, save in the case of a local company where the consideration is financed out of capital reserves of retained earnings generated from its operations in Trinidad and Tobago. So either the money is paid through a bank, a licensed foreign exchange dealer, the transaction, the payment for the shares is done through a licensed foreign exchange dealer in Trinidad and Tobago, or it's financed out of the capital reserves of retained earnings of the company in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's the Foreign Investment Act.
But companies borrow money to buy other companies all the time.
But they pay for them. The issue is not the loan. The issue is not the loan. The issue is that what we have been advised, and as I said, we don't advise ourselves. What we've been advised is that the payment for the shares should take place at the same time that the ownership of the shares is transferring from one party to another.
So what the ministry is saying is that this is...
It's not what the ministry is saying. This is the advice
Senior Counsel,
we have received. We don't advise ourselves.
Senior Counsel is saying that this is almost a preferential arrangement that the key shareholders are getting.
That is not in the advice. What the advice said is that the loan arrangement is not consistent with the offer, the circular, published by NCB, the takeover circular.
So what will we do? They just change the offer from this?
No, I don't think they can start from the beginning. They've made an offer, and I think they have to follow through with the offer. Okay, they have to follow through with the terms of the offer.
So they have to pay for the shares pari passu with all other shares that are being sold here.
Well, everybody has to pay for the shares, if that answers your question.
So NCB has to pay the
All,
shareholders?
no, all. NCB has to pay everyone that they are purchasing shares from.
Right.
I'm not singling out any
It
person.
can't be a 3-year payment plan for certain special shareholders.
The advice we have received is that an arrangement whereby the shares are not paid for at the time of transfer is not consistent with the offer or the Foreign Investment Act. That's the advice we have received. Is that clear to you, Mr. Wilson? Don't misquote me. You mean again? All right, are there any questions?
Other things?
Coming back to the CL matter, can you confirm that former director of CL Financial has now been made consultant to home construction for the purpose of the sale of assets?
I have no knowledge of that.
The initials are RB.
I have no knowledge of that. Do you want me to say that a third time?
No.
Okay. Any other questions on NCB or Mr. Lockjack's statements? CL Financial?
What's the time frame you think for the approval by the ministry?
Well, once they cross this hurdle of sorting out how they're going to pay for these shares, I can't advise them on what to do, you know. They could be an exchange of checks, you know. They can raise the money, pay it through a bank, and then get repaid right away, and then the loan arrangement can kick in. But I'm not going to advise them on what to do. What the advice I have is that they have to pay for the shares. They can work out a transaction. As I said, there could be a simultaneous exchange of checks, so that solves the immediate cash problem. You know, NCB could raise money somehow, pay it through a bank, and then the investors could give back the money and enter into a range. But the money must be paid. The shares must be paid for.
So apart from that, the loan issue and the foreign investor issue, are there any other issues that you think?
No, because we have also sorted out something that they have to apply for a license for all of the companies involved. The Trinidad company, the Jamaica company, the Canadian company, etc. And we have no indication that they're not going to do that.
Then are there competition issues?
We're satisfied that this is an investment that we welcome once they sort out that problem. In terms of competition, I am not of the view that this will create... This is a substitution. Yeah. Remember, Guardian Life is already operating here. Yeah. So you're just changing ownership. So there's no real competition issue that I need to concern myself with. So it's just this payment issue that they need to sort out. Okay? All right, Ms. Bridgelal, you have 5 minutes.
Yesterday in GSC, the Commissioner of Police said that they have a 200 million debt and a 40 million, it's about 40 million special projects.
I saw a report in your newspaper that somebody sent to me. You know, I don't read your newspaper. Okay. Right? No, that's true. Not willingly. But I saw that report. I have to get to the bottom of it. What I think has happened is that with the change of the guard at the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, there's been a transition. So a lot of people have come in, a lot of people have gone out. I think the new people are not entirely familiar with how to do the paperwork necessary to request funds, because quite often I get asked to intervene and help. And that to me, as far as I'm concerned, is a real problem. But I'll tell you something. Whenever a problem is brought to my attention with respect to the police service, and in particular Mr. Griffith needing funds, we immediately move to solve the problem. I was not aware of this. I saw it in the papers. What I do know is that we've had situations over the last 6 months where they have run out of money and they haven't made the request to the Ministry of Finance. Seriously. It's not unique to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. We had a situation with the NCC, where the chairman of the NCC was very vocal in the newspapers saying they got no money. When we checked, they hadn't made the request for the funds because the chairman thought that the CEO had done it, and the CEO thought that the financial controller had done it, and nobody had done it. They had sent no request for funds. So as soon as we found that out, and this is what I will deal with, the way I'll deal with this thing with the police, I've asked budgets to, actually early this morning I asked budgets to just tell me how much money have we released to the police service in terms of money for salaries and wages, money for goods and services, money for their projects and programs, their equipment and so on. How much have we released in the first 6 months of this fiscal year? What requests have they made for funds? Are there any outstanding requests in the system somewhere? And I did that because I want to help them. So I will facilitate the police and I will facilitate Mr. Griffith.
What's the situation with regard to the board's position on Liat?
Liat? We are 1% or less than 1% shareholder of Liat at this point in time.
According to reports, Liat is very close to collapsing.
But we are, yes. But the government of Trinidad,
stop flying into Trinidad.
The government of Trinidad and Tobago got out of Liat a long time ago. So we are not shareholders.
Has the government been approached to become a significant shareholder once again?
No. We have not been asked. We got out of Liat long ago. We have not been asked to get back into Liat, and we have no plan at this point in time to get back into Liat. But what I can tell you is that this ministry does not sleep. So seeing these stories reported in the papers in the usual alarmist, controversial, scandalous kind of way, which would give the uninformed reader the belief that air transport to Trinidad and Tobago will just suddenly cease tomorrow. We are taking steps to deal with it. Caribbean Airlines has capacity, and will, if there is a problem, I'm hoping there isn't, but if there is a problem, and Liat finds itself unable to afford to fly to Trinidad, then Caribbean Airlines will pick up the slack and deal with that.
Generally, what's the cash flow situation with the government as we speak?
Tight.
Tighter this year than last year? Tighter in 2017 than now?
Thanks for the question. The government gets its revenue in different ways. Most of our revenue comes in at the end of each quarter. So we would get money in September, December, March, June. So that the months of October, November, January, February, April, May are difficult months. They always are, because oil companies and large taxpayers, large companies, they pay their taxes at the end of every 3 months. So we always have a problem in those middle months, and that's what the government overdraft is for. It's intended to handle those, let's call them the lean months. When you have a combination of a lean month and end of a month where we have to pay salaries, because we have to pay billions of dollars in salaries every month, it's always very difficult for us. So that for the first part of this month in March, because taxes are not paid until the end of the month, and in fact things like royalties and supplementary petroleum tax are not paid until the 21st of the month after the end of the quarter. So for example, we won't get royalties and SPT until the 21st of April. So it's always difficult for us at the beginning of a month like March, because we're exhausting our reserves in February. In January and February, we're exhausting whatever reserves we have. So March is always a tough month for us. We get over that hump towards the end of March into the end of April, and then we struggle again in May as we head towards June. So it's difficult.
Wait, just to build on that, they have, with the SPT in particular, especially small producers, have said that with the low oil price environment right now, it's hard for them, given the current structure of the tax. Is there any consideration to reevaluate the way the tax system is constructed right now, and also right now, where some analysts say that the 12.5% royalty on new PSCs especially can possibly affect the investment potential of especially new blocks. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, the second one is old talk, because there are many countries where royalty is 15%. That's just talk, and that is self-serving talk, put out by the industry, to sort of intimidate governments into not imposing taxes and duties. With respect to the SPT, absolutely not. I can assure you, taxpayers would feel pain if we did not collect SPT. SPT is a significant revenue stream for us. It's there for a reason, and we have absolutely no intention of adjusting that.
What big model, especially for the small operators?
The answer is no.
But refunds and an update on the performance of heritage, especially.
All right, well, you have 1 minute, Mr. Wilson. With respect to VAT refunds, I did say that this year we try to improve VAT refunds, and we will. I am hoping that if we can get that NIF2 going, or if we can sell MHIL shares to Proman, that's give us 2.7 billion, give us some cash to start increasing the amount of VAT refunds. If we can't, we'll find another way to do it. We may have to enter into some financing arrangements, but I think it's important, as I said at the chamber meeting last year, just after the budget, that we do try to speed up and improve and increase the amount of VAT refunds, and I intend to keep that commitment. Well, it is. The problem is it's a reality. It's cash flow. Or every refund that we give reduces the amount of cash available to the government. But I understand the business's position. They're quite right to complain. That is something that they have a right to complain about, not this nonsense about how we control NCLF. All right? And
an update on heritage petroleum.
Well, I have to go now, I think you're going to try and make me late. I think I'll have to leave that for another time. There's always a mid-year review. I'm programming it for me.
For me.
Yeah, for me. Okay? Thank you very much.